here yet?
I understand that she's running late. I guess she's en route now. Mr. Wilson, we'll take you out of order for now. That's okay. We'll obviously understand that since it's her application for reconsideration, we'll give the opportunity to rebut after she makes her presentation if she's here.
Thank you. Can you just give an idea of how long we're going to wait?
The meeting was set for 7:30. It is 7:50 right now. We'll give her some. We'll try to accommodate her, but we have to continue to move on with the agenda today. And she did put into two pieces of correspondence that were received by the commissioners. Her position on the reconsideration. So they're well aware of it, and it is going to be considered regardless of whether or not she's here to verbalize that too.
Thank you for that. And you recall that the applicant had earlier on in this proceeding delayed many hearing dates relative to a vacation of 3 weeks. So we have been very patient and indulgent of her calendar and her schedule. So we hope we can get through this tonight.
I will add thanks and patience to everybody on getting the final copy of the resolution, because I too dared to take a vacation for the past 2 weeks, and although John released the final copy of the resolution, Mary Ellen shockingly was on vacation too, so we didn't really get to review this until yesterday, so no blame, but vacations have interrupted this for everybody. But please continue.
Thank you. Just briefly on the motion to reconsider. I think you've heard enough from lawyers during this process, which is really about historic preservation and the proposal that's before you. There were no misrepresentations made to the Historic Preservation Commission in connection with the application. There was and is no written agreement with a prospective purchaser for a movie theater. There was an email submitted by Ms. Donato saying that there was discussions in an agreement with a movie theater operator, but there was no written agreement at any time. The comments made by the applicant throughout the hearings were accurate and truthful. The objector is trying to deflect from the thorough and reliable expert testimony and reports submitted in support of this application and the Historic Preservation Commission's careful consideration and findings. Finally, and probably most importantly, whether the applicant marketed the property for sale or made efforts to continue a theater use at the property were not material factors in the Historic Preservation Commission's decision to grant certificates of historic review. The resolution, which is long and thorough, makes many factual findings, none of which relate to these topics. That's really all I have to say on the motion to reconsider.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate your commentary, your brief on that from earlier today. No comment, but the information is certainly received. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson.
Additionally, I submitted to Mr. Testa a list of a few proposed revisions to the resolution. There's just copies enough that I can for everyone.
Out of courtesy, Mr. Arnold,
I have a copy for her.
Perfect. Mr. Nato, just cut you off. Mr. Wilson, I believe you're complete with your position on reconsideration.
Motion subject to your kind offer to rebut.
To rebut, obviously, because Mr. Nato was not here to provide her commentary to the commissioners. She did provide two documents in writing, one dated June 24th, 2019, with various emails exchanged apparently, and then correspondence dated July 9th, 2019 as well. Sorry. Yes, what's two, as to her response or reply, I would say, to your opposition to the reconsideration. So, Mr. Nato, if you'd like to just highlight your position.
Yes, thank you very much, and I apologize. I did traffic on the way out, had to get a different car because the car was completed, so I ran into every delay possible. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present what I think is a very critical component of the decision-making process with which you are confronted. There's a reason why the ordinance has, as the very first and foremost standard, the requirement that a property owner make every reasonable effort to use the property for its historic purpose and in its historic context. And it's because that is also the first and foremost standard of the Secretary of Interior. So we want to try to save properties, and if there's an opportunity to do so, it should be taken advantage of. As I sat through these proceedings and I listened to the various statements that were made on behalf of the applicant, I was of the understanding that some effort was potentially made. But a further examination of the record, including what I think to be some very revealing emails that were obtained from the borough itself, it became apparent that this applicant did not try in the least to have this property marketed for a theater, the existing use, the existing building for a theater. That he in fact apparently refused to negotiate with one offer that was registered for a theater use. And so really, during the course of his ownership, did not attempt to comply with that very first standard. So the board in this reconsideration request has an opportunity to impose a condition that is a mandatory condition that echoes the requirement of your ordinance and simply would require the developer to consider offers that were made. There's an offer made by Madison Theater, there may be others, and allow that process to take place consecutively with whatever site plan variance application will be pursued. And that application currently is incomplete, has not been followed through with, and so there's time. It's not going to take time away from anyone. It's not going to do anything, but it gives you as a commission the opportunity to make certain that the one provision of your ordinance that is so critical to the future success of your historic district is followed through with. And that's all that we ask. I think it really salvages the horns of the dilemma that you find yourself on and gives you the opportunity just to apply the ordinance. Clearly there was no effort to sell. There were statements made which likely led you to believe to the contrary. And I think it's very important that that particular provision be followed. I don't think you'll ever regret having done it, and if negotiations do not succeed in the purchase of the property by, say, Madison Theater or another group, then the applicant can move forward with their application, and they can do so at the same time. I just think it would be losing a tremendous opportunity, and I doubt that anyone here would want to do that. I recognize that your entire decision was very much colored by what you perceived to be the condition of this building. Not only was it perceived as not being significant historically and architecturally, but I think that we have very strong evidence from Nancy Zerbe and from others that this building is a real cultural icon and one that should be at least given an opportunity to survive. If it doesn't work, no harm done. The applicant can continue while these negotiations take place. I've also, with respect to the resolution, I have included some additional comments, all of which really just come from the record of these proceedings. The one most important, of course, is that provision about demolition and the protections that Mr. Hatch, your consultant, recommended be placed on the resolution, and which I understood to have been stated, but they kind of got a little bit watered down. So if we could, consider tightening up those provisions as well, I think that would be a great thing.
You're referring to both your letter of earlier today, you could write around noon, talking about we can provide references on the reconsideration request, and then also your very late in the day notice. When that came through at 4:46, I said, she's not going to make this meeting on time. I mean, she's driving a long way, so don't mean to curse you there, but that, wow, you pushed that.
Yes.
So there where you pick out specific items. After working with this application for many months and being very familiar with this, I am pretty cognizant of what our ordinance says, and I'm not aware that our ordinance allows us to do that kind of delay. I know there are communities that have a preservation ordinance that build in a delay and an assertive requirement to seek someone who would use or preserve a property. Our ordinance does not, and if I cast my mind back to the moment when that was first introduced and passed, eventually by our borough council, I'm quite sure it's not in there for a reason. So I'm just curious how we would comply with something which I'm aware is in the municipal land use laws, in other municipalities' ordinances, but our ordinance doesn't give us that option.
Right, well, the cooling off periods, based on the Savannah model, are not in the ordinance, but we're not asking for that. What essentially we're asking is that you implement the first provision of your design guidelines, which are applicable to all of your certificates of historic review. And that is that first one is that every reasonable effort shall be made to use the property for its historic use. So you have that ordinance. Now, we have a situation here where there really is no evidence in this record to support the conclusion that the board should be making, the commission should be making in compliance with that particular provision. So this would simply be a condition that implements your ordinance. Doesn't need to implement delay. It can be run concurrently with the application that must yet be rendered complete and that must be pursued before the planning board. So it's not stopping anything, it's not saying you can't do anything until this happens. It's simply saying that, you need to comply with our ordinance. You have to make every reasonable effort. If you don't think that an applicant needs to make every reasonable effort, then I might suggest that you ask the council to repeal the first provision of the design guidelines. Otherwise, they have no meaning. The first provision says every reasonable effort shall be made.
And I think it's pretty clear to each member of the commission here that is not to be repealed. That was pretty fairly addressed, I think, throughout that draft resolution that's provided. But I would like to hear Mr. Wolf's position on that request. Because I think Mr. Wolfson, and I want to make sure, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you did submit to me before a meeting tonight, hand delivered to me, I guess if you will, your suggested revisions to the resolution, and specifically it's your paragraph 2 referring to page 12, paragraph 9 of the draft resolution. Why don't you and Ms. Donato speak together directly, or if you want to speak on at the podium, it's fine too.
I'll do whatever you'd like me to do. Would you want me to go outside?
It might, what I'm just saying too, as this is last minute, so both the comments were, and the resolution was prior to last minute too, so I want to give you both an opportunity maybe to see if the language that's proposed by Mr. Wolfson in his paragraph 2 for our paragraph 9 of the resolution is going to be sufficient, if you think that meets what your needs are.
I'm looking at it, and I think that this particular provision relates to the new theater that is being proposed. Our request is that the existing building be marketed. So I don't, in all respect, I don't think that language, I think that language unfortunately weakens what I thought was an excellent requirement of your resolution about having a new theater, although, not a traditional theater certainly, but a new theater built in a portion of the first floor space, but not with respect to the preservation of the existing theater. I'm just trying to figure a way to reconcile the fact that the ordinance has a requirement. The requirement has not been met. And so the only way that I can see to meet this requirement is for the board and the commission, in reconsidering its previous decision, recognized that there was no proof that there were reasonable efforts made. And I think that the two letters that I submitted really prove that, and not by me, but by the record, by statements made by Mr. Rinaldi to municipal officials, by statements made in this record, and by the applicant's own statement that if any efforts were made, they were made by the prior owner. And that's not the way this is supposed to be. So it just reconciles the ordinance, and it doesn't, and I think if it could be imposed, which I think it can be, it wouldn't, you know, the worst thing to do is to have a decision that's not defensible. So I can report looking at every reasonable effort is going to say there has to be some way to make that have some meaning. And so that's all we're trying to do, is to make the ordinance have real meaning. And it doesn't have to delay anything. They can go right forward with their site plan approval and, not stop in their tracks while they're receiving, potential offers and negotiating for the sale.
Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry, Mr. Nara, I don't mean to cut you off. Am I cutting you off, Mr. Nara, or are you?
No, I know you wanted to see if that could be.
Context of
I
this.
think I basically said what I can say, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
No problem.
So your decision is totally defensible. It's thorough, it's well-reasoned, it's based on voluminous expert testimony. So those kind of threats and scare tactics that have been perpetrated in the later portion of this hearing should not be responded
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Wilson. You've seen her, Ms. Donato's or State Madison's proposed changes that did July 9th. Have you seen those today? Do you have any position on those?
to. Yes, as indicated on the sheet I gave you, we do not support any of those proposed
Okay.
changes. And I'm certainly able and willing to talk to those individuals if you like. But I just wanted to make a couple more observations. In addition to Chairwoman Foster's recognition that there's no delay provision in Madison, such as there is in Harding, for instance, the ordinance has an absolute right to demolish. That being so, this applicant has gone through nearly a year process, and I think the time for the decision has been made, the time to memorialize that decision in a resolution that is thorough and supports the process that you all went through is now. One other point that Ms. Donato makes in one of her proposed conditions and in her statements again tonight, there's been no determination that our application before the planning board is incomplete. None at all. We were told that the preference was to not review it for completeness and not start the planning board process until we went through this process. Not something that we wanted to do, but the applicant agreed to do it. Your ordinance is in contravention of the state statute. The state statute says that it gets referred to you once it is deemed complete or there's a public hearing set. Your ordinance says to the contrary, and my client made a decision, as he has consistently throughout this thing, to work with the commission, including the design changes, the presentation of expert testimony. So respectfully, if you want to talk specifically about the conditions at some point, I'm happy to do that, but the time to memorialize your decision is now.
Just for clarification, what do you mean by, do you want to talk about the conditions at some point? What do you mean by that?
Well, I have some proposed changes, and Ms. Donato has some proposed changes.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, yeah. Go ahead and
Do
speak.
you want me to talk about my proposed changes?
Yes, absolutely. And Ms. Donato, I think you have talked a little bit about them as well. So while you're here, talking about the reconsideration aspect, why don't you talk about the proposed change resolution as well?
Okay, and does everybody have a copy of the sheet that I gave you?
I've not circled to them yet. We were going to review that in executive.
Well, if we're going to talk about it first, I would respectfully ask that you have it in front of them.
I'm trying to do this as a matter of orderly proceeding. And it made sense because you were discussing the reconsideration. references.
So we do have copies.
Great, thank you. So the first proposal is that paragraph 10 on page 10 be revised to read: Saxon's principal Anthony Rinaldi testified during the public hearings that if demolition was granted, the current proposal for a new building includes space for a new movie theater operator. I noted in the draft resolution that there was a citation to pages 17 to 19 in the transcript that I reviewed.
That's correct.
The only references to
Specifically says at 9, he actually specifically said a 90 to 100 seat theater. He said that in his testimony.
Okay, well, pages 17 through 19 doesn't reference a number. It does say this includes space for a new movie theater operator. And it also included a small movie theater in an attempt to address the concerns of the residents, which we heard. Those are the only references to the movie theater on those pages. The application
He
that's
said he had several proposals, and one of those proposals included a 100 seat theater actually.
in other portions of the hearing, there were references made to the size of the theater. That's correct. The application that's before you states the following, quote, if the applicant is unable to find a commercially acceptable tenant for the theater, the applicant proposes to utilize the theater space as retail space. That is the application that is before you. Furthermore, at the June 11th meeting, when there was a recitation of conditions, Chairwoman Foster stated that the condition would be to preserve the theater use, quote, the theater use in the building as per the applicant's plan. And I can't read your mind, but our plan was clearly set forth in our application. That is what's before you. So that's our first requested change. The second requested change on page 12 in paragraph 9 would be a revision to read, the site shall be promoted and marketed in a commercially reasonable manner for use as a public movie theater or entertainment space, and Saxon shall use commercially reasonable efforts to secure a movie operator tenant. Again, consistent with the application before you. The third proposed revision, page 13, paragraph 10. The request is that there be an insertion of the words, quote, unless variances are granted by the Borough of Madison Planning Board relating to scale, mass, size, and height to the end of that paragraph. And as we expressed during the pendency of the hearing, the law is that your conditions are subject to relief that can be granted by the planning board. So that's the reason for that request. And finally, number 4 on page 13, paragraph 12, we ask that you please consider the insertion of, unless the change is made in furtherance of the conditions set forth herein. And that has to do with the requirement that we come back to the HPC virtually on any change. We don't know how the planning board process is going to go or evolve. It's a collaborative process. And so if we're making a change that's in furtherance of the conditions that you placed on our approvals, we would ask to be excused from the process. Those were the only changes we received.
You mean the planning board approves them? In that last piece we're talking about?
If the planning board approves the variances that we see that relate to mass and height and size of the building, it's our position, and the law is that that will trump the condition of this property. They are the only governmental body authorized to grant relief.
Variance will be correct for height.
Correct. Those are the requests.
That's a paragraph.
Not bad for a 14-page resolution. Thank you.
I applaud the commission and their attorney on doing a great job for a very comprehensive record. Thank you.
Was there a question here? I'm sorry.
The drafts we have in front of us only have the off-pages
Excuse me, are there recused members?
That's correct.
I'm not, no, I'm confused, it's just we don't have.
Complete copies. Incomplete copies. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jill.
If I may respond to Mr. Wilson,
Absolutely,
also-
Mr. Mauer.
Thank you. So throughout these proceedings, I have stated several times in writing and before the commission that there seems to have been this omission of action as the advisory role in connection with the application for development. So the applicant really can't have it both ways. The municipal land use law says that the planning board shall refer an application for development when the application is deemed complete or when scheduled for hearing. Since neither of those two events have occurred, and since this resolution does not address the advisory review on the variance and site plan, but it rather is a certificate of historic review for new construction and for demolition, we're mixing apples and oranges. The applicant can't have it both ways and not address the advisory review and then try to say that your decision is trumped. So it isn't, because this report is not a report on referral from the planning board, but is a decision on the certificates of historic review, for which this commission has mandatory authority to impose conditions. So I think the procedure here is very, very confusing, and we keep getting, it's like a shell game. No, this isn't review of the application. Yes, this is review of the application. If the application is incomplete, you're not supposed to be reviewing it because it hasn't been sent to you yet. And the certificate of historic review is an entirely different animal and is looked at in that respect. So I really fundamentally disagree. Otherwise, I think it even further affects negatively your authority as a commission. And it's so evident why this municipality put historic preservation in. One of the most beautiful downtowns I've ever seen. So, if you want to say that, I think what your resolution did was a certificate of historic review. It doesn't say anything else. So I really must disagree in that respect. And I think that the idea that the applicant said, well, my application said that we'd have a theater if we could find someone who wanted it. I think that that is their position. You were asked to review that and make a decision. You weren't asked to accept lock, stock, and barrel a building that was so much higher, bigger in mass, bulk than anything else in your whole district. You're putting a big building in the middle of a very, very beautiful area. And so you made recommendations on your certificate of historic review and not on an application for development. I looked at the resolution, I considered your decision, I commented on it previously numerous times. So we're not there yet. That's a whole other issue that would be addressed once this application is pursued before the planning board and determined to be complete and they proceed and the planning board sends it to you. So I just think that, there's just this, if somebody asks you for something, does that mean that that's all that you can do is to say you grant it or deny it? No, you have authority, reasonable authority to apply the conditions and provisions of the designs, guidelines and criteria, the Secretary of the Interior standards being those that are guiding you in your decision. And so I really don't think you should be giving up any of the power that you have. Are you going to be deciding on the reconsideration first, and then whether to adopt a resolution? You're going to do that after you take argument? Is that it?
After you complete your arguments on this, we're going to go to executive session, come out. Then
And I think, Mr. Testa, I told you on the phone, I thought you did a Herculean job with the resolution, and I thought it was very thorough. And, but there's one thing that you couldn't make findings on, because the record is just sufficient, and that is whether the applicant made reasonable efforts to preserve this as a theory. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Wilson.
The objector's motive of delay is once again exposed by these hyper-technical procedural arguments. To say that the resolution, which includes the historic review certificates for both the demolition and the new building, doesn't have recommendations in it, is insulting to the process that you undertook, and is insulting to the resolution, which clearly sets forth your recommendations. Additionally, being reminded that you have the ability to place conditions on these certificates, that's exactly what you've done. The discussion here is only about 4 proposed changes by my client to that draft form of resolution and some requests by the executive. So,
What's your understanding about 112-6A 1 and 2 of the ordinance? They say mandatory conditions can be imposed for demolition and redesign and reconstruction.
we're not debating, we're just asking for some revisions to the conditions that we placed on it.
Thank you. Think so? Yes, I think so.
Thank you both. This is a lot to take in at a short notice, but I think we're there. I'm going to leave you with a little cartoon at executive session, and we're going to recuse ourselves next door for a few minutes to try to work this out, and we'll be back soon. Motion? Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine.
That's not supposed to be me?
That's not supposed to be me. So a motion to move into executive session, moved. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Right, let's.
Thank you.
I'm hoping for days.
executive session. Motion?
Motion.
Okay, second.
Second.
Thank you, John. All in favor? Aye. We are back in our regular meeting. Okay, before we address the resolution that we discussed at great length, I have a comment regarding the request for reconsideration. And we thank St. Madison Theater and their attorney for their letters to us and requesting a reconsideration of our decision on the Lions Theater application. The Commission has taken this very difficult application very seriously and has made judgments based on evidence presented within the several public hearings from March through June 2019. At no time were members of the Commission approached by staff or officials of the Borough of Madison with any insinuation of a particular conclusion to be reached. Our decision was made independently, each member choosing to prepare a statement individually, and it was only at our last meeting in June that we shared with each other our own thoughts. As you know, it was a unanimous decision to permit demolition of the deteriorated theater building in order to apply mandatory conditions on its demolition, documentation, use, and rebuilding on the site. The letter earlier today strongly suggests the desire for an operating theater in town. Our resolution follows up on the comments from Saxon indicating their willingness to include a theater space within the new building. The resolution makes the search for an operator-tenant more pressing and asks for reasonable efforts to market the theater building. We agree the cultural value of an operating movie theater in downtown is important for the preservation of the character of the historic district. If Save Madison Theater wishes to continue its efforts to operate a theater in downtown, they should do so and enter into talks with Saxon on how such a theater might be created and open to the public. I hereby make a motion to deny the request from Save Madison Theater for a reconsideration of the decision reached at our June 11th, 2019 meeting and memorialized in the resolution that we will discuss momentarily this evening. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Any further discussion of the members about the reconsideration? All in favor? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, then the resolution, this motion, not resolution, I'm sorry, this motion passes. Thank you again for all your information. Now, our new business for this evening is to take up the resolution of the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission approving the application of Saxon Real Estate for a certificate of historic review as to the demolition and new construction of the Madison Lions Theater and imposing certain mandatory conditions. John.
The resolution was previously circulated in draft form to the attorneys for both the applicant as well as the objector, St. Madison Theater, earlier today. The proposed resolution that is being presented right now has minor changes to it, beginning after the first now therefore. The whereas clauses are a recital, as you know, of the ordinances and the historical process of the application as we are here today, based on the prior hearings that occurred in this matter. So I'm going to begin, for sake of brevity, because it is quite a lengthy resolution, with the first now therefore clause. I'm going to begin on page 6 of the proposed resolution. And again, I'll just read the title one more time, as this Foster has already done. This is resolution number, proposed resolution of the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission approving the application of Saxon Real Estate Group for a certificate of historic review as to the demolition and new construction of the Madison Lions Theater and imposing certain mandatory conditions. Now therefore be it resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that the Lions Theater is historically and culturally designated as a contributing site within the Madison Civic and Commercial Historic District. Since its creation in 1925, the Lions Theater always served as a public motion picture theater and gathering place for borough residents and visitors. Now, therefore, be it further resolved that in accordance with Section 112(6)(a)(1 through 2 and Section 112-8B(1 through 10) of the HBC's ordinances, the Commission renders its decision as the Saxon Realty Group's application for a certificate of historic review based upon the following facts and evidence revealed during the Commission's hearings. Item 1, the significance of Lions Theater's site location. The Lions Theater is located directly adjacent to the Madison Post Office and across Lincoln Place from the Delaware Lake Line and Western train station, now the New Jersey Transit Station for Madison. Both the Post Office and New Jersey Transit Station sites are designated as key contributing structures of historical and cultural significance in the National Register of Historic Places nomination for the district. The theater stands at the edge of one boundary of the district. To its southeast along Lincoln Place stand single-story commercial buildings of mid-20th century construction that are not included in the historic district. Item number 2, potential effective relief requested. The HBC's historic preservation expert, John Hatch, states in his report of March 5, 2019 that, and I quote, "The demolition of a contributing structure within the district is typically the most drastic and most damaging action that can be contemplated to any historic district. By definition, it will have a negative impact on the character of the district." End quote. Item number 3, cultural significance. As stated in Mr. Hatch's report, over the course of its and I quote again, "Over the course of its long life, the theater has become a cultural touchpoint for the community. Clearly, many people have fond memories of seeing movies here. It has long played an important part in the cultural, civic, and commercial life of Madison." Period. End quote. Item number 4, architectural significance. In the district's nomination to the National Register of Historic Places, the Lions Theater is described as a vernacular commercial building. Likewise, Mr. Hatch explained in his report that the exterior of the Lions Theater has a relatively simple and utilitarian design, with only a few design flourishes, including the much altered and simplified marquee, some cast stone detailing, the inset plaque, the pilasters, and the central gate. Period. End quote. Quote, "The size and rear of the building are completely utilitarian, with few windows and no design intention other than to provide the necessary openings for egress and loading." Period. End quote. Extensive alterations have been made to the exterior of the original structure, including the front facade, entryway, and theater marquee. As further detailed in Mr. Hatch's report, quote, "The ground floor has a prominent main entrance surmounted by a marquee that has been altered from its original configuration." Period. End quote. Open quote, the coffering is like the original, but the exterior has been simplified and covered by painted wood boards. The ground floor now has 4 to one each side of the main entry, arched, infilled windows. This is also a departure from the original design. In addition, the front facade was significantly altered at some point, placing the more elaborate storefront openings with infilled arched openings. Therefore, the Lions Theater structure is not considered to be architecturally significant in its present state. Period. 5, structural integrity. The HBC's structural design engineer expert consultant, John McManus, including in a report submitted to the HBC, that the structural system of the Lions Theater has significantly deteriorated due to neglect and the failure to perform required routine maintenance over the years. Virtually all structural components that make up the structure in its current condition would require extensive rebuilding, reinforcing, or replacement. Period. End quote. Saxon structural engineer Winnie Hostetler inspected the building on February 1st, 2019, and also determined the building is structurally compromised. Mr. Hostetler testified as to the details forming the basis of his opinions and conclusions during the public hearings. Concerning the general makeup of the Lions Theater structural system, Mr. Hostetler explained that the low-pitched gable roof of the building is supported by steel roof trusses approximately 17 feet apart from one another. Wood joists support the roof between the steel trusses. Wood framing sits on top of the joists and trusses and supports the roof shingle. The exterior masonry walls of the Lions Theater include piers structurally supporting the steel roof trusses. The terracotta tile infill between the walls forms the wall surface and laterally stabilizes the building. The foundation to this theater is concrete. Mr. Hostetler testified that the wooden roof joists were overloaded and sagging significantly. To remedy this problem, steel trusses would require raising and additional roof joists that have to be installed. The suspended plaster ceiling must be removed, and the damaged roof joists must be removed and replaced. The ceiling would then need to be reinstalled and resupported. Mr. Hostetler also explained that water infiltration possibly led to warped, sagging, or displaced interiors. Regarding the foundation walls, Mr. Hostetler testified that there are significant diagonal cracks throughout the exterior load-bearing walls, indicative of foundation settlement at the pier locations which support the steel roof trusses. He also testified that significant cracks and spalling were found at the front foundation and foundation footings, and similar diagonal cracks were found throughout the interior load-bearing walls, demonstrating foundation settlement. The front facade of Lions Theater building has pulled away from the structural portion of the building's box frame and would need to be anchored properly. In addition, a report prepared by Mr. Madison and John Dang, PD, provides that the sloped portion of the slab on grade of the building, quote, has significant settlement throughout, end quote, and large portions have sunken and or heaved. The roof wood joists have water damage, cracks, and excessive deflections, and the roof structure, truss, joists, etc., as a whole, was under design based on current building codes and requirements. During the public hearings, Mr. McManus testified that although the steel trusses appeared to be in good condition, the building had obviously been neglected for at least 2 decades, resulting in extensive water damage. The interior walls are pulling away from concrete reinforced floor slabs. Only the front section of the basement is in satisfactory condition, and the wood framing supporting the second floor mezzanine level was in poor condition. Mr. McManus explained that the Lions Theater was not in danger of collapse. However, he further opined to the commission that virtually every component of the building is either under design or damaged enough where it would require extensive work or replacement. Period. Mr. Hatch also commented on the structure in his reports, explaining that those issues ranging from separation of the brick face from the structural backing, structure cracks, and spoiled brick are serious and will need to be addressed if the building were once again to be occupied. Mr. Hatch opined the Lions Theater's rehabilitation or restoration would be expensive but not impossible. Item number 6, current and potential uses. As to this issue, Mr. Hatch opined that the constraint facing the building in its current form is that it is not easy to rehabilitate, reconfigure for uses other than the original one. However, Mr. Hatch further elaborated that a number of historic downtowns in New Jersey have viable movie theaters which tend to be niche theaters showing carefully curated selections and smaller venues. Item number 7, the importance of the Lions Theater's community and whether removal would be detrimental to the public interest. Mr. Hatch opined that the Lions Theater, quote, is not an architecturally significant building in the historic district, period. However, he further opined that, quote, it is a contributing building and has provided an important cultural, commercial, and civic function for many years. Removing the building and leaving a vacant lot would be a clear detriment to the public interest, period. Quote, the goal should be to bring a viable use of uses back to this important site, period. 8, potential to promote and attract business and visitors and increase property values. Mr. Hatch opined, quote, a working movie theater brings visitors to a downtown, and because it is an attractive and relatively rare feature, many even attract new residents. However, this is only the case if the movie theater is operational and well maintained. An empty, deteriorating building, particularly at a prominent location near the train station, will diminish value and interest in the permanent asset, period. Number 9, impact of removal on the district. As to the probable impact of removal of the Lions Theater upon the ambience of the district, Mr. Hatch reported that, quote, if the theater were demolished and left as a vacant lot, other, less architecturally interesting buildings outside the historic district boundaries, along Woodland Place and behind it, would become more prominent, or would be newly exposed to view, and the street edge would be compromised. Period. However, Mr. Hatch also opined that, quote, a new building does have the possibility, if well designed, of bringing further redevelopment to this section of the town, southeast of the district, which could benefit the entire downtown historic district financially and aesthetically. Period. Item number 10, consent to continue peer reviews. Saxon's principal Anthony Rinaldi testified during the public hearing that if demolition was granted, Saxon would continue to operate a 90 to 100 seat public theater within a portion of the property. Item number 11, potential avenues to mitigate the impact of demolition and new construction. As for demolition and any reconstruction of the Lions Theater site, Mr. Hostetler agreed that the appropriate standards established by the United States Department of Interior in their temporary protection technical notes must be followed in order to protect the adjacent buildings within the district. Mr. Haft confirmed in his report that demolition should only be approved if certain mandatory conditions are met, such as approving demolition after full land use approvals have been granted and all building permits have been issued, requiring the developer or owner document the site through detailed measured drawings and photographs, preserving and reusing the important historic features of the building, including the stone plaque in the central gable with the name of the building and the timber, and installing permanent interpretive materials such as historic photos and a summary of the building's history in a publicly visible location on and within the new building. Mr. Hatch also supported the applicant's proposal to incorporate a theater into the design of the new building. Public input. During the course of the proceedings, members of the public voiced opposition to the demolition and reconstruction of the Lions Theater. However, during the May 20th hearing, objectors principal and many members of the community discussed the importance of continuing the public theater use at the site. Now, therefore, be it further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that Saxon Real Estate Group's application to demolish Lions Theater is appropriate given its poor structural condition, the many changes to the structure, and the lack of architectural significance attributed to the structure in its current state. Period. This resolution shall serve as a certificate of historic review issued in accordance with the HBC's ordinances approving demolition of the theater and requiring Saxon's complete compliance with certain mandatory conditions imposed on both the demolition of the Lions Theater and on the proposed and new construction of the replacement building and improvements at the site. Now, therefore, be it further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that in accordance with Section 112-682 and 112-8C7 of the HBC's ordinances, the Commission does hereby find and conclude that with the exception of the size, mass, and height of the new building, the new proposed improvements and redesigned replacement structure depicted in the most up-to-date renderings that Jeffrey Gertler presented to the Commission during the public hearing on May 28, 2019 are appropriate for a building within the district. However, any building above 3 stories, open paren 45 feet, close paren in height, would severely detract from the surrounding streetscape and industry as a whole. Accordingly, except for the proposed size and height of the replacement building, open paren 4 stories / above 45 feet, close paren, the Commission does hereby issue the certificate of historic review approving the redesigned replacement structure in the form submitted by Saxon to the Commission on May 28, 2019. Proposed new structure is subject to certain mandatory conditions regarding its size, height, materials, design, storefront arrangement, window size and materials, and other details reflected on the May 20 plan. Period. Now, therefore, be it further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that certain mandatory conditions must be imposed at Saxon Real Estate Group and its successors of interest and/or title to mitigate the negative impact associated with the loss of the Lions Theater and any new construction of the replacement structure. Period. Now, therefore, be further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that continuation of a public 90 to 100 seat boutique theater at the site is necessary, reasonable, and as in furtherance of the public interest to preserve the historical, cultural, and social significance of the Lions Theater and the district as a whole. Now, therefore, be it further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission in accordance with its delegated authority set forth at Section 112-6A 1 through 2, Section 112-8C2, and Section 112-8C7. The Commission is hereby imposed upon Saxon Real Estate Group and its successors in title and successors in interest and/or title the following mandatory conditions. Number 1. During the demolition and new construction phases, Saxon Real Estate Group and its successors in interest and/or title shall at all times comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Period. Number 2. During the demolition and new construction phases of the project, Saxon Real Estate Group and its successors in interest and/or title shall at all times comply with and abide by the United States Department of Interior's reservation tech notes, temporary protection, including those set forth at tech note number 3, protecting a historic structure during adjacent construction, particularly as affecting the adjacent key contributing structures in the historic district, namely the post office and the New Jersey Transit Railroad Station. A true and copy of the United States Department of Interior's reservation tech notes, temporary protection technique number 3, protecting the historic structure during adjacent construction is annexed to you as appendix 1 to this resolution and is incorporated here by reference and simultaneously approved. Permits shall not be issued and demolition and any new construction shall not commence until after Saxon Real Estate Group and or its successors in interest in or title and all necessary documentations to the Borough Building Official for review and confirmation of Saxon compliance with this mandatory condition. Period. Item number 3. Demolition shall not commence until after Saxon Real Estate Group and its successors in interest in or title confer with authorized representatives from the United States General Service Administration and New Jersey Transit as to safekeeping and protection of the United States Post Office and Madison train station buildings during the demolition and construction phases of lines of theater property. At the time Saxon applies for a demolition permit, it shall submit to the Borough Building Official written proof of consultation as to the safekeeping and protection of the United States Post Office and Madison train station buildings for review and final approval prior to issuance of a demolition permit. Item number 4. Demolition shall not commence until after all required state, county, and local land use approvals have been secured. All buildings and soil permits have been obtained, and borough officials are fully satisfied that the demolition and new construction is in full compliance with all applicable laws. Item number 5. Demolition shall not commence until after Saxon has first completely documented the site with detailed measured drawings, photographs, and video recordings, which shall be submitted to the Commission's designated representative for review, safekeeping, and confirmation of compliance. Period. The Secretary of Interior Standard for Architectural Documentation is provided in the resolution for consultation. Item number 6. Demolition shall not commence until after Saxon first safely removes and preserves the Gaston Madison Lions Theater plaque and the central gable of the building for reuse in the new building. The interior chandeliers for reuse and the ticket booths for reuse and or replication. Item number 7. The Madison Lions Theater cast on plaque shall be reused in any new replacement structure and shall be installed in place of any visible public on the front facade of the building as depicted in the renderings of Jeffrey Gerber during the public hearing on May 20, 2019. Item number 8. Permanent interpretive material, historic photos, and a summary of the building's history shall be installed in the new structure and shall be incorporated into the design of the new building within public view as depicted in the renderings of Jeffrey Gerber during the public hearing on May 20, 2019. Specifications for the above referenced interpretive material shall be reviewed and approved by the HBC prior to its installation. Item number 9. Continuation of a public theater at the site is necessary, reasonable, and is in furtherance of the public interest to preserve the historical, cultural, and social significance of the Lions Theater and the district as a whole. A 90 to 100 seat theater shall continue in active operation on a portion of the Lions Theater property. A 90 to 100 seat theater shall be included in the final design plans and within a portion of the replacement building structure to ensure that the property can continue to be used as a theater for public use and entertainment. The site shall be promoted and marketed in a commercial and reasonable manner for use as a public movie theater, and Saxon shall use commercially reasonable efforts to secure a movie operator tenant. Item number 10. On new construction of the site of the Lions property theater shall be in the character of Madison Civic Commercial District, such that the scale, mass, size, and type of replacement structure to be built at the Lions Theater site shall be kept in line with the character of the Madison Civic Commercial District and shall not be larger than 3 stories, 45 feet in height as measured from average grade as to the borough's zoning ordinances and building department regulations. Item number 11. Keeping with the character of the Madison Civic Commercial District, the exterior of the replacement building to be built on the Lions Theater shall be registered on street plan facade and all other sides, with light-colored brick for any upper recessed levels. Commercial space entering from the living place shall be centered more or less on the facade. Storefronts with traditional articulation of bulkhead, large display windows, and transom window above. A closed canopy above the first floor level of the facade to protect passerbys on the sidewalk from inclement weather. Windows to apartment size with setbacks within the facade all as shown on the May 20th plans presented to the commission, and always keeping the textures, colors, and materials of the building in harmony with the character of the district. Item number 12, an amended certificate of historic review shall be required to be secured from the Historic Preservation Commission whenever any subsequent changes have been made to the building design plans related to the exterior replacement building and structure to be built at the site, unless the change is made in furtherance of the conditions set forth herein. Item number 13, in accordance with section 112.8CE, following issuance of a certificate of historic review, the borough's construction official and or his appointee shall inspect all work approved by this certificate and shall regularly report to the commission the results of such inspections, listing all work inspected and reporting any work not in accordance with the certificate. Now therefore, be it further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that all mandatory conditions set forth in this resolution shall be included on any demolition permit and shall be posted on the site at the Lions Theater property in place of plain unrestricted view to the public during all phases of demolition and new construction. Now therefore, be it further resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that a certificate of historical review approving demolition, design, replacement, structure, construction, line site shall be valid for 2 years from the issuance of this resolution and shall thereafter automatically expire unless prior to the date of expiration, Saxon Real Estate Group and its authorized successor in interest and or title apply for it to secure an extension of time from the Commission. And lastly, now therefore, be resolved by the Borough of Madison Historic Preservation Commission that a representative commission shall be made available to meet with and appear before the Borough of Madison Planning Board to further assist the Planning Board in its review of Saxon Real Estate Group's site plan and variance application.
Thank you very much.
Included as an appendix, as stated, will be the tech notes from the United States Department of Interior. Mr. Wolfson will provide it to you as a copy as well for reference.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead. That was the public reading of the resolution.
Yes. So now,
The procedure will be a vote on that. Is the
so
motion?
we have a motion to,
Madam Chair, may we work briefly on the proposed resolution?
I suppose briefly, although we will not comment or act on it.
Your comments.
That's discouraging, but okay. Just for the record, fact on page 10, number 10, we continue to believe that the review of the transcript is inconsistent with the characterization of Mr. Rinaldi's testimony. And while we appreciate
The addition of a sentence on condition number 9, we think that it leaves unresolved the answer to the question of what happens if it is marketed and promoted in a commercially reasonable manner for use as a public movie theater, and they are unable to get a commercially reasonable tenant. So we would ask that some addressment of that be included in that condition.
If you have to apply for amended certificate of historic review at that one time.
Thank you, John. All right. Do we have a motion to accept the resolution as read and as you all have copies of in your hands? So moved. Okay. And voting members on the resolution are the members who participated in the discussion last month. Do we have any further discussion on the issues in the resolution? Hearing none, do we have a vote for the resolution? Aye. Yes.
Aye.
We hear you. Okay. Any opposed?
Can we take a roll call, Madam Secretary?
That's a good idea.
Ms. Lenahan,
Yes.
Ms. Foster,
Yes.
Mr. Soler,
Yes.
Mr. Toto,
yes.
and Mr. Luber.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the resolution passes and is approved. Thank you all.
A copy of the resolution will be available tomorrow after 12 o'clock in the municipal clerk's office for public inspection.
Just like to thank the commission for its thoughtful deliberations and the amount of time and attention that's spent on this matter. Thank you.
Deep breath. The Preservation Commission meeting continues. A few other matters to address. Right. As you know, part of our regular work is we get sign and facade applications. They have a 10-day fuse, and so these are dealt with by a subcommittee. Reporting on the sign and facade applications that we received since our last regular meeting. The first is for replacement of Caldwell